The Marvel Zombies show is so awful that 5 minutes into the first episode, I was rooting for the zombies to kill everyone. Start the video. My life. If you thought the MCU scraped the bottom of the barrel with Ironheart, Marvel Animation just said, hold my beer. You know the foundation must be rotting in the house of ideas if the best they can come up with when their we need content overlords at Disney come a-knockin' is something that was lame and stupid even in the comics and spun out from a terrible episode of a terrible previous show that the fanbase had long since turned on to transparently cash in on a pop culture craze that had already died out and was gathering dust years before the show was even put into development. Marvel Zombies is a bafflingly idiotic collection of tired tropes, outdated concepts, and some of the most irritating tone-deaf attempts at comedy Marvel Studios has ever seen, strung together by a paper-thin story that spends 2+ hours jerking the audience around with one pointless MacGuffin and red herring after another, only to finally reveal that the narrative had barely gone anywhere, carried by some of the most obnoxious failed characters the Marvel Universe has produced in decades and written so incompetently that I genuinely wondered if the creative team behind the show was trying to get themselves fired. My first time trying to get through this show, I tapped out after half an hour. I had to force myself to come back the next day and finish it, which turns out was no small feat. But oh, come on, Thorias, you Kermit the Frog sounding face for radio having motherfucker, you must be thinking, it can't possibly be as bad as all that.
Oh, my sweet summer child.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. Marvel Zombies has a lot in common with Ironheart in that it somehow makes the wrong turn every step of the way, only without the you get what you fucking deserve ending, where the insufferable lead character you've grown to hate with every fiber of your being is sentenced to eternal damnation. Instead of that, they double down on this character big time, while the dark and gruesome fate is reserved for everyone else, including any character that you might actually like. This entire project is shockingly out of touch with its audience, and it was very obviously developed before Marvel was given a very harsh wake-up call that what they've been doing since Endgame has kinda sucked and the fans aren't having it anymore. So what they wound up with is a show that revels in all the stuff about the MCU that fans have been rejecting for the last few years, to the point that it almost feels like Marvel produced this show for the sole purpose of spiting its own audience. You're sick of the multiverse saga? Well, here's a new multiverse story. You thought What If shit the bed? Eat this What If spin-off show and like it. You don't like Ms. Marvel or Ironheart or any of the other new characters we've tried to introduce since Phase 4 limped out of the gate? Boy, do we have a surprise for you! Rewind the clock a few years back to when Marvel still had that post-Endgame high and were way too cocky for their own good. They thought they could do no wrong back then, so let's load up this show with a bunch of untested new characters that we don't even know if the audience is gonna like yet. That's why the roster of this show reads like they cast it on the island of misfit toys. Marvel version. We spend 4 episodes following characters that the studio obviously thought were gonna be big deals by now, only to be left with a whole lot of egg on their face when they were proven wrong far too late to course correct. Ms. Marvel? Failure. Ironheart? Failure. Kate Bishop? I like the character, but they've attached her to Ms. Marvel via that Young Avengers project, so failure. Yelena? Another character I like, but one that's failed to catch on after multiple attempts. Shang-Chi and Katie? The movie was a middling success at best, and they've been in limbo ever since. Blade? Stuck in development hell for years. Who knows if that movie will ever even happen, like they clearly thought it would have by now. And there's a bunch of other people who don't do the show any favors either. Blade aside, that roster feels like we're being pranked. And that's just the start of the problems. Next, we have our lead character. And who do you think that is, huh? Maybe Spider-Man or Blade or some other popular, successful character who fans will actually tune in to see? Nope. It's Kamala Khan, a character who's been a failure by every metric since the day she was created, because spotlighting our YA, kid-friendly heroine meant to appeal to tween girls in a dark, rated M for mature, post-apocalyptic hellscape full of death, violence, and rotting flesh geared toward an older male audience will be what finally makes fetch happen, am I right?
Is your idiot brain getting fucked by stupid?
Yeah. If you're thinking that Ms. Marvel being the main character in a story like this makes no sense whatsoever, you're right. It doesn't. It's awkward as hell. And the audience learns that immediately. The first episode focuses on Kamala, Riri Williams, and Kate Bishop, and if I hadn't already suffered through Ironheart and Snow White, this would be the worst thing I've seen all year. This was fucking painful, and a bulletproof argument for why that Young Avengers project should be Batgirled before it ever sees the light of day. I cannot stress enough how goddamn nails on a chalkboard obnoxious these three are together. You would think that in the wake of a zombie apocalypse where most of humanity is either dead or turned into flesh-eating monsters, that it might have forced these girls to grow up, to get serious, mature a little bit, act like adults. But it doesn't. Kate is alright for the most part, but Riri is still insufferably arrogant, full of herself, and surrounded by enablers. Kamala is still the same cutesy-poo fangirl who Marvel thinks is way more charming than she actually is, who never, ever, ever shuts up, which feels really f***ing out of place after the world has basically ended. None of them are acting like people trying to survive a zombie apocalypse actually would, and what makes it even worse than you're thinking is the comedy. Oh my fucking god. The comedy. In some of their recent projects, Marvel has mercifully begun to dial back their signature brand of humor. The makers of Marvel Zombies didn't get the memo. Simple common sense tells us that a show like this, post-apocalyptic horror, end-of-the-world type shit, should be very dark and grim and serious. And there are moments when it is, but they also way overcompensated for that seriousness by writing so many goddamn, excruciatingly unfunny, awkward AF, cringy-ass jokes, and every single fucking one goes over like a fart in church. This was so unbelievably bad. This writer needs an intervention. Dead serious. Get all his friends and family together, sit down with him, and just tell him, bro, you are not f***ing funny. You have to stop trying to be funny. You are humiliating yourself with this shit and humiliating us by association. And it only gets worse, because as the show gets darker and more people die horribly, the jokes get more and more awkward. You cannot take anything in this show seriously, because every f***ing time something serious happens, the moment is instantly ruined by non-stop god-awful jokes seemingly aimed at audience members who'd be too young to even watch a show like this. A city full of people just got massacred by zombies, but you wouldn't know it from our heroes, who in the next scene are geeking out about D&D. D and f***ing D. No, that's not sarcasm, it literally happened. The human race has been nearly wiped out by zombies, there's hardly anyone left alive on Earth, and Valkyrie calls this a bummer. Yeah, an extinction level event is a bummer. Alexei is crushed, heartbroken, and suicidal after his daughter is killed by zombies. 3 minutes later, he's grinning, laughing, and doing silly banter.
Hello? That's not funny!
Nothing matters. Nothing f***ing matters. Guys, the entire show is like this. Comedy of any kind has never been less fitting in an MCU project, but it's dialed up as high as I've ever seen it, and it's the absolute worst it's ever been. Torture. Every second of this was fucking torture. And of course, Kamala is the biggest recipient of this. She gets twice as many jokes as anyone else, and the show obviously thinks that she's the most adorable thing ever, and oh god. Oh god. It's so cringy. It's so awful. You have no idea. The human race is all but extinct. Zombies are overrunning the planet. There's no hope in sight anywhere. And here's Kamala still fangirling like a 12-year-old at Comic-Con when she meets a superhero. I have not wanted a fictional character to die this badly since Riri Williams. But that still means a lot, damn it. And you know what makes it all the more frustrating? Blade was right there. Blade, the supernatural character who's known and famous and popular for fighting undead monsters not unlike zombies. Blade, who made perfect sense to be the lead of this show. Blade, who was the only character I could stand in this show because he's the only one who's treating the zombie apocalypse as a serious thing. The only one who's not spouting god-awful, insufferably cringy-ass jokes in every other f***ing line. Blade is the only character who feels like he belongs here. The only one. Blade should have been the lead, but no, that. Let's make Kamala the main character, write it so that everything revolves around her, and bend over backwards to make sure everyone knows that she's the most important person in this story, even if that makes no goddamn sense at all. The amount of bullshit they expect us to swallow in their efforts to shove Kamala down our throats feels almost pathological. I'm gonna spoil everything here. Screw it. I don't care and you shouldn't either. Did you know that Kamala is the one who kills zombie Namor? Namor, who is supposed to be as strong as the Incredible Hulk? Bullshit. Moments before he dies, Thor anoints Kamala as the last Avenger, even though Thor doesn't know Kamala from a hole in the ground and hasn't seen her do a goddamn thing outside of one fight scene. Bullshit. It is stressed multiple times that zombie Wanda, the Queen of the Dead, needs Kamala for something. At this point, Wanda and her zombie horde have pretty much conquered the Earth. Humanity is nearly gone, there's no help coming. Wanda won. She has all her Scarlet Witch powers, and at the very end, she now has the power of the Infinity Stones on top of that, so she's basically an omnipotent god, and yet she still needs Kamala for some reason. Wanda's the most powerful being in all of existence. What the hell could she possibly need or want Kamala for that she can't do herself? And they never explain this, because I kind of doubt the writers know or even care what she needs Kamala for. It's all just a bunch of transparent, performative bullshit to justify Kamala being the main character of this story because she has no other reason to be in that spot. And if right now you're thinking, wow, that sounds like some real shit writing right there, you're right. It is. Here's a few other examples of the writing quality. When the show begins, Riri has an Iron Man suit that she stole from Tony, who I guess is dead now. Instead of wearing the suit herself, she has an AI piloting it while she walks around fighting zombies without a suit. Which is weird, right? Zombies can't bite through an Iron Man suit, so wear the suit yourself, that way you have protection from the zombies. That would be the smart thing to do, and they keep reminding us in every f***ing scene that Riri is a super genius, but she never wears it. You know why? Because if she does have the protection of an Iron Man suit, then the story can't happen. So she chooses not to wear the suit like a dumbass, and well, what do you think happens to her? Exactly. At one point, zombie Captain Marvel shows up. Captain Marvel is a zombie, even though there's no way she could have been turned into one because she's f***ing indestructible. Whatever. Zombie Thor shows up at the end wielding Stormbreaker, even though we all saw Stormbreaker get destroyed in an earlier episode. Continuity? What's that? Zemo has to feed zombie Namor some bodies to keep him from attacking Zemo's city, and instead of giving Namor some useless nobodies who Zemo has plenty of, he gives Namor a bunch of powered heroes, the same heroes that Zemo needs to protect his city from all the other zombies, because Zemo is a f***ing idiot. Then when the zombie Atlanteans attack anyway, it's those same heroes that Zemo just tried to sacrifice who fend them off, immediately proving what an asinine idea it was to try to sacrifice them in the first place. Come on! I criticized the What If show for being bad fanfiction. Calling this bad fanfiction is an insult to bad fanfiction. This is so sloppy and so amateurish, I don't know how it got greenlit. The storytelling is so f***ing bad, and they seem to want to tell some kind of long-form narrative here, but they also keep doing these weird standalone stories that don't add up to anything and are just forgotten about as soon as the episode's over. New stories or new plot points keep getting introduced and then they're just abandoned after a few scenes so they can move on to the next one. It's all just there to fill time. One episode has a character who's figured out how to mind control zombies with science. Mind controlling zombies, holy shit. You'd think that would be a big story, a huge game changer in a zombie apocalypse, but no. No, the episode ends, and it's never mentioned again. Then we see a bunch of Skrulls who think they're in a f***ing Mad Max movie all of a sudden. Holy shit, what's that about? Beats me. 3 or 4 minutes, then it's not a thing anymore. Zemo has turned that underwater ocean prison thing into a city, a refuge where people can live in safety away from the zombies. Half an episode, done. The second the show moves on, none of this shit matters anymore. And there is this overarching story about Kamala trying to signal the Nova Corps so they'll come and fix the Earth somehow. If the show had been building up to one thing this whole time, it was that. But then, aw nuts, the Nova Corps knew Earth was up shit creek this whole time, and they didn't give a rat's ass. They just quarantined the planet so anyone still alive down there can go f themselves, which means that the whole story we'd been building up for most of this series amounted to nothing and was completely fucking pointless. It was all just one giant narrative MacGuffin to waste our fucking time. Are you kidding me? That's not tragedy or irony or a clever plot twist. There's nothing narratively satisfying about this. It's just a bunch of bullshit. The entire fucking story was a red herring. They needed something to get the characters from one location to another location so they could fight Zombie Wanda. 75% of the whole show, and that's all it was there for. Who on God's green earth could possibly think that was good writing? I couldn't figure it out. But then I saw in the credits, teleplay by Zeb Wells. And it all made sense. If you didn't know, Zeb Wells was responsible for one of the absolute worst runs on the Amazing Spider-Man comics in many years. Remember how Peter Parker and Mary Jane's relationship was destroyed by some rando jackass named Paul? That was Zeb Wells. And he wrote every single episode of this. Suddenly, everything comes into focus. The horrid storytelling, obnoxious characters, atrocious dialogue, even simple things like basic world building are an utter mess. In a story like this, it makes sense to base it in a world that's similar to 616 Earth, so there's no real confusion going in. The backstories are squared away, world building is all set, you know who all the characters are and where they are and whatnot, so you just need to put zombies in there and you're off and running. But they made the idiotic decision to spin this out of that fucking awful zombie episode of What If Season 1, and all that does is create a whole lot of questions they could have easily avoided. When Shang-Chi showed up, I wondered why he wasn't using the 10 rings against the zombies. It was a few minutes before I realized, oh, I guess the Shang-Chi movie never happened in this world. But why? Blade is Moon Knight now. That's fucking random. Where's Mark Spector? I don't know. He died off screen, I guess. But why? And they don't do anything with this. There's no story there. Blade is just Moon Knight now because it. It's the multiverse. There's no rules here. Stories don't need to make sense or have consequences. We can do whatever we want. Zeb Wells just picked two names out of a hat and mashed them together. That's all the thought that went into this. And if you didn't see that What If episode from a couple years ago, you're wondering why the hell Scott Lang's head is in a jar floating around with the Doctor Strange cape. There's so much randomness and confusion here with the narrative and the setting and the characters when there didn't need to be. Does Zeb Wells have ADHD? Did he think a zombie apocalypse wasn't enough to hold our attention, that he needed to add all this other batshit stuff, most of which goes nowhere and means nothing at all? Maybe. Would explain a lot about his Spider-Man run, actually. And lest anyone label me a hater, now I'll go over the positives about the show. The animation is nice, and some of the fight scenes are pretty cool. That's it. Everything else is shit. Everything. Up to and including the ending. And I use that word loosely. This isn't an ending. It's not the culmination of anything. It's not even really a cliffhanger. It feels like they didn't get to a good chapter break in the story before the money ran out. So right in the middle of a scene, the whole thing just stops and the credits roll and you're left cursing yourself because this has been 2+ hours of your life that you can never ever get back. This show. Marvel Zombies is for Marvel Animation what She-Hulk Attorney at Law was for the MCU. One awful idea after another, incompetent storytelling, heroes so annoying I wanted the zombies to just eat their brains and get it over with, and all of it driven by some of the biggest creative hacks you could imagine, who I have to assume only have jobs at Marvel in the first place because somebody picked their names out of a hat. Nothing about this show justifies it even being made in the first place. A worn-out premise that would have been old news 5 years ago, a baffling cast of characters, some of whom Marvel only thought would be popular by now because they're stupid, and others who should be relevant by now but aren't because they're stupid, a ridiculous spotlight on the most annoying character in the whole damn thing because Marvel couldn't read the room if you put a gun to their heads, storytelling that would be inept even by Tumblr standards, a complete waste of time, and yet another embarrassment in the post-Endgame era that's been full of embarrassments for this studio. God help us all!
That escalated quickly.
Marvel, you shit the bed on this one, and the zombie craze burned itself out a long time ago anyway. Peace out, and let's not do a second season of this. Thanks so much for watching. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow all of my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And if you want to support the channel, being interactive is the best and maybe only way to make sure the algorithm knows. So hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, make sure you're still subscribed, all the YouTube things. I'll be back with more soon. Take care, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.